Welcome back to They Did What? Your source for the internet's craziest, most entertaining stories, where I go over them, analyze them, and most certainly make fun of them. Today, or later today, covering part 4 to the story, which is titled, Wife of 7 Years, Opened Our Marriage Without My Knowledge, Has Breakdown When I Tossed Her in a Suitcase Out. And no need to do a whole recap all over again, because you guys are obviously invested in the story, know what's going on. But what happened in the previous video is the guy met with his attorney. The attorney told him, you got to do the reconciliation thing for a year, put up the big show so you can get the best deal possible in the divorce, get her to agree to posting up and put the house in your name and all that. And the guy doesn't want to do it, but he has to play the long game to get what he wants, his house and no alimony. So it ended with that, and he's off to the bank. So continuing on with part 4 of this guy's adventure here. He says, I had time to get to the bank before they closed. I opened a new bank account and transferred half of the money from our joint account. I got home and canceled the credit cards in both our names. Good, bro. Get right on it. I emailed Beth what I'd done at the bank and with the cards. I also told her that I definitely wanted her to take the new job and seek some counseling. The rest, posting up, polygraph, I'm working on. She probably thinks I'm telling her to take the job and seek counseling because I care about her. She'll assume that I'm weakening. Yes, she will. That I can't live without her and I'm already caving. But she needs to think I'm seriously considering reconciliation for me to get what I want. I also told her I can't see her just yet. I'm still too traumatized. If this is what you got to do to get what you want, then so be it. Later that week, my mom called. She had lunch with Beth. My mother said Beth is not who my mother thought she was. Thank God. If his mom was on her side, this would be even worse of a mess. Beth began telling my mother that it was all a mistake. Tom began flirting with Beth as soon as he started work at her office about 4 months ago. It was constant compliments, attention, and touching her on the back of her arms, blah, blah, blah. At first, she was not attracted to him at all, and she politely but firmly told him to back off. He did not, and she admitted to my mother that she found the attention of a good-looking younger man unsettling, but also exhilarating. Beth is 33, and Tom, she said he is 26. Okay, 33 is not 23, but 33 is not 53. Okay, come on here. You can't tell, I mean, if she's good looking and takes care of herself, believe me, dudes are checking her out, but not like it was when she was younger. Within a month or so of Tom's arrival, it became common knowledge in the office that Tom was sleeping with the married owner of the real estate agency. Oh boy. Let's call this happy couple Mr. and Mrs. Boss. Mrs. Boss is in her late 20s and is really attractive. She runs the office where Beth and Tom work. Mr. Boss is about 10 years older than her, in his late 30s or early 40s, and manages their other real estate office in an adjoining town. Beth explained to my mom that when she heard that Tom and Mrs. Boss were involved together, Tom suddenly became more interested in her. Mrs. Boss is pretty and younger than Beth, but Tom obviously wanted Beth. A real ego boost. She started to daydream about Tom, but she didn't act on it. She figured people have fantasies and eventually they go away. This one did not. It got stronger, but Beth assured my mother that she continued to keep Tom at bay, that she loves me. She was physically attracted to Tom, but was not going to have any sort of relationship with him. I'm her guy and always will be. Yeah, we could tell by part 1 of the story here how she was going to go have an affair with him and you know, all that. About a month ago, Beth and Tom went to view a new listing together. They were alone in the house, and Tom took Beth in his arms and tried to kiss her. She pushed him away. Beth told Tom he already has a girlfriend, Mrs. Boss. Why was he bothering Beth? Tom said Mrs. Boss was a consolation prize. It was Beth that he wanted. Beth should just say the word, and he'll dump Mrs. Boss immediately. He knows what he's doing. He's playing to her ego that, he wants me more than the younger woman. The next day, Tom told Beth he broke it off with Mrs. Boss. He asked Beth to dinner. He knows a great restaurant and wants to show Beth off. Just as friends, if that's what Beth wants. Beth's husband, should have a problem with Beth having dinner with a colleague. Was I so jealous and controlling that she wasn't allowed to even eat dinner with a coworker? Beth told him she was happily married, no dinners, no hotels, no nothing. Remember, this is Beth's side of the story to this dude's mother here. And clearly his mother, I'm assuming in the moment, isn't dumb and realizes she's lying through her fucking teeth. But was dinner so bad? She began to imagine herself all dressed up in a tight, sexy dress, hair done up, entering a classy restaurant on Tom's arm. All eyes at the restaurant would be on her, this hot woman escorted and fawned over by a handsome young man. Right here, guys. Attention, validation, status, all that. And just having dinner with Tom wouldn't be really cheating. Not even a date. She began to think of scenarios where she can go to dinner with Tom without me finding out. Just a sort of what-if fantasy of her own amusement. How would they do it? She figured they would go out of town, far enough so there'd be no chance that anybody they knew would see her with Tom. That'd probably mean an overnight stay. No way she'd be able to do an overnight without me figuring out what she was up to. Too risky. But she continued to think about how to do it, but just as an intriguing puzzle to solve. She couldn't come up with a solution to the puzzle. When she and Tom went to visit another listing, and he started again on them getting together, she told him there was no way they could be together without me finding out, and she's not risking her marriage for dinner with Tom. She asked him, just as part of the game she was playing with herself, just pretend how they could do it without me finding out. Key word, the game she was playing with herself. Tom came up with a plan. Beth would tell me she had a training weekend that she had to attend to. In a city she had to fly to. Instead, they would drive to a resort, which was far enough away that they wouldn't run into anyone that Beth knew. If I wanted to take her or pick her up at the airport, just tell me the office hired a car and drive her to the airport. Tom told her the story had worked for him in the past. He really started to press Beth about the weekend getaway. She told Tom she isn't agreeing to do anything with him. It was just fun to think about how they would do it. But she began to take Tom's plan seriously. It could work, but only for dinner and maybe dinner and then dancing at the club. Nothing else. Dinner and dancing at the club. Dinner and dancing at Taco Bell. See if you guys know what movie I'm referencing there. Dancing, yeah, that's all. This is fucking cheating, but now they're going to bump and grind. Yeah, not cheating. Hooking up an SEX never comes from dancing on the dance floor, huh? She went to talk to her mother for advice about Tom. Oh, enter the mother-in-law. Beth's mother told Beth that her feelings toward Tom were not going to go away. Just having dinner with him is not going to be enough and will probably make things worse. Even if she moved to another job, she'd be constantly thinking about what she missed with him. Mommy, mother-in-law dearest knows something here. If it will continue to bother her, nod her, and definitely end up affecting our marriage. Tom would grow larger than life in her eyes, and that would increasingly diminish me. Beth would come to resent me and our marriage because I was the one in the way of fulfilling her needs. That is something I will definitely notice. Her mother told Beth to get Tom out of her system. Once her fantasies about Tom became reality, Beth will be back to attending to her marriage. So now Beth can blame her mother-in-law. It was my mom's fault that told me to do this. I didn't want to do it, honey. Our marriage would be stronger because she would no longer spend all her day daydreaming about Tom. She would have him. Beth's mother continued, say Beth fell in love with very expensive designer shoes she absolutely had to have but couldn't afford. She spent all her time thinking about how good she would look in those shoes. She was so consumed with the shoes that her work began to suffer, too distracted to do her job properly. This is the fucking justification for... Right here. This is actually good. I'm glad that this is written here just to show you how things are justified with people. Then she figured out a way to steal enough money from her employer to buy the shoes. Stealing the money would be good for her employer because once she had the shoes, she'd be back to being a great employee she'd always been. Or an even better employee. The money she stole would be offsetting by her dedicating her work even harder. And she would have the shoes to wear whenever she wants to. She wouldn't need to dream about them anymore. Oh my God, this bullshit here. Beth's mother went on that nowadays women take lovers when they get an itch. Modern women believe it's their bodies to do with as they please. Oh, my body, my choice. Yeah, it's amazing where that initially came from and then gone into just justifying cheating and all that. There is any wife she knows who has had at least one affair. It doesn't mean anything. None of them really care about the guy. It isn't love and marriage. Just a lot of fun and excitement. And a lot of good sex that she finds the right guy. The key words there, fun and excitement, and she left out attention and validation. Finding the right guy may take some time exploring, but my mother-in-law assured Beth it would be well worth it. The exploring will be lots of fun. She shouldn't feel guilty. It's just doing something for herself that her husband doesn't need to know about. Again, this is all the shit that this guy was told. Remember, his mom informed him about all this shit. Besides, every wife my mother-in-law knows is convinced that her affairs helped her marriage. Very happy wives mean very contented husbands, as long as husbands don't find out. If I found out about her cheating, Beth should say it was a one-time thing that will never happen again. Yeah, sure. So she's willing to do anything to save the marriage. Even gave me a detailed list of things she's willing to do. Beth should also be able to convince me that her infidelity strengthens our marriage. She should tell me that her stupid fling with the other guy proved to her how superior I am to him in every way, and how much he loves me. I'm her man, she picks me, not the other guy. That'll be the real ego boost for me. My God, listen to all the plotting and scheming and bullshit here. That our marriage will endure this small hiccup because I love Beth so much. That I won't divorce her. It's better not to get caught, but Beth's mother convinced Beth that she should go for it and not worry about the consequences. Beth and Tom began to make plans in earnest for their weekend getaway, but Beth assured my mother that it was just for drinks, dinner, and maybe some dancing. Does she really expect his mom to believe this fucking bullshit? They would have separate hotel rooms. My mother asked why Beth was bringing condoms if she has no plans to have sex with Tom. Beth started crying. Bag Handbook Chapter 2. When all else fails, bring out the waterworks. Tears may trick most men, but tears are not going to trick your average woman, let alone a woman that's been around the block like this dude's mom. My mother continued that between sobs, Beth said she doesn't know why she listened to her mother's nonsense. Beth, you're a grown-ass woman, 33 years old. You're not new to this world. You know what you're doing. You're responsible for your own actions, as is any adult. You may not act like an adult, but you're responsible for your actions. Cut the bullshit. Don't blame your fucking mom. She was confused. Temporary insanity. She couldn't get this guy out of her mind, and her mother convinced her it was all natural and okay. She should have never listened to her crazy mom. It's her mother's fault, and she almost cheated. Thank the heavens she didn't really cheat. I knocked some sense into her before she actually left for the weekend. You all remember how he knocked some sense into her. Everything would have been so much worse if she'd gone with Tom. My mother asked me what Beth meant when she said I knocked some sense into her. Your mom's not missing much. She had asked Beth, but all Beth would say is that I forcefully convinced Beth that leaving with Tom was a bad idea. I told Mom I don't have any idea what Beth meant. That's probably a good thing. I asked my mom what she thought about Beth's explanation. She explained that Beth went to her mother for advice because she knew my mother-in-law would tell her that it was okay to cheat on me because there would be no consequences. Her mother told Beth exactly what Beth wanted to hear. She gave Beth permission to do exactly what Beth wanted to do. My mother said she's pretty sure this was not Beth's first affair. There is no way this is Beth's first rodeo. Beth blames her mom for giving her bad advice. She blames Tom for pressuring her to go away with him for the weekend, but the weekend was Beth's idea. Tom probably would have been happy with a quickie in the back room of a car somewhere. My mom thinks they probably already had some quickies. But Beth wanted more. She wanted the excitement of being a single again for a whole weekend. And the excitement of sneaking around and planning and plotting and scheming and all their bullshit you have in books and, let's be honest, blogs in real life. And I'm sure Beth wants to gossip about this bullshit with probably at least one girlfriend who is or one day will do the same thing. When she came home on Sunday, she was going to tell me all about her weekend with Tom. She thinks that once she explained everything to me, that I'd be okay with that. Yeah, okay. Or at least I'd have to accept it. My mother thinks Beth thought she convinced me that fulfilling her fantasies, as she put it, is good for our marriage. My mom believes that Beth planned to continue to date Tom and others. We'd have what Beth approvingly refers to as a modern marriage. And that is why so many guys are not getting into modern marriages nowadays. Beth told my mom there's nothing wrong with modern marriages. But for my mother's benefit, Beth was quick to add that only if both spouses agreed to it. After Beth returned from her weekend, my mother is sure Beth thought I would end up agreeing to live with Beth's infidelity. Beth had already turned our marriage into a modern marriage. Beth told my mother over and over again how wrong it was to plan anything with Tom. How sorry she is. Yeah, I can just feel over here in South Florida how fucking sorry she is. Sorry my ass. How she loves me so much. Beth said that's what my mother expected to hear. But Beth is really kicking herself because her plans blew up in her face and might ruin her marriage. My mother thinks Beth believes that her real mistake was planning an entire weekend away. That was a reach too far. Way too risky that I'd find out before she had her weekend complete, before she could present with me with a fair accomplice, and before she could convince me how beneficial a modern marriage would be for us. You mean an open marriage? Convince you an open marriage is so beneficial? Beth believes that the real problem is that I found out her plans before her weekend. I wouldn't have reacted so badly if Beth had a chance to explain everything after she was back from her weekend. What was she going to explain? I was effing another guy all weekend and lying to you and all these other things, but it's for the good of our marriage. I love you so much. Yeah, that'd work out real well. My mom is positive that this was not Beth's first and will not be her last fling. Nope. If we reconcile, Beth will either try to open our marriage or she'll be more careful in the future. Beth really does not see anything wrong with having sex with other men. My mom says that she may be wrong about Beth, but she doesn't think so. She supports my decision to divorce Beth. She wants her future grandkids to actually be my children. I'll need DNA tests if Beth's their mother. Thank God we have a story here where the mother is supporting the guy who's been wronged in the story. How many have I done when the mothers do not? I had met a Mr. and Mrs. Boss, the people who Beth worked for, many times at work-related parties. I wanted some revenge on Tom and thought about the best way to do that. I could tell Mrs. Boss that her boyfriend Tom has been pursuing Beth. That may cause some problems for Tom, but Tom said he had broken off with Mrs. Boss. Better to tell Mr. Boss about Tom and Mrs. Boss. Yeah, anyway, this dude was cheating on his wife. This Mr. Boss needs to know. He has a right to know. I decided to call him at work the next morning. I'm sure that wasn't a pleasant conversation. Later that night, my uncle would get called and we agreed to meet for lunch the next day. Aha, enter your uncle who your dad recommended you have a chat with. I called Mr. Boss before 9 a.m. I introduced myself and he said he remembers me. I told him I'm divorcing Beth because she cheated with a guy in her office named Tom. He replied that Mrs. Boss told him about Beth's affair with Tom. He said he was sorry to hear that Beth has been cheating on me. Beth and I always seem to be a very happy couple. Because she's putting on a show, that's what she does. Mrs. Boss told him that Beth and Tom have been having an affair for months, but has recently begun to disrupt the office. A few Fridays ago, Mrs. Boss told Beth and Tom individually that each was needed to man the office over the weekend. Beth separately told Mrs. Boss that they were busy over the weekend, and Mrs. Boss put two and two together, figuring they were going away together for the weekend, and confronted Beth about her continued infidelity. Beth told Mrs. Boss it was none of her business. Mrs. Boss told Beth it might be time for Beth to find work elsewhere. Ooh, time for a cat fight. Beth said, fine. She'll have no problem getting work for another agency. Beth quit her job, packed her stuff, and stormed out of the office. What, no cat fight? What the hell? Mrs. Boss told Mr. Boss about all this after Beth had quietly quit, or had already quit. He was very angry at Mrs. Boss. Beth is a top earner. Mrs. Boss should have told Tom, not Beth, to find another job if she was so worried about Beth and Tom's affair. He said he thought about telling me that Beth was cheating. He called his lawyer to check if he had any legal liability if he told me. He chuckled and said, nowadays, you have to first check with your lawyer for anything if you want to take a piss. That is so true, and it is so sad about that. The lawyer told him I could threaten to sue him, but a lawsuit wouldn't be successful. His lawyer told him to stay out of it. Mr. Boss asked if I'm planning to sue him. Needless to say, I was speechless. Beth told me she quit on this Saturday after I discovered her plans. She said she quit so I wouldn't have to worry about her being around Tom anymore. Even if everything else Mrs. Boss told Mr. Boss was a lie, Beth had already left her job before her weekend with Tom. She didn't do it for me. I gathered myself and told him the reason I'm calling is not because I want to sue him, but because Beth says that Tom is or was sleeping with Mrs. Boss. Has been since shortly after he was hired. I don't have any evidence if it's true other than Beth and that Tom admitted his affair with Mrs. Boss to her. I thought Mr. Boss should know. Okay, I hope Mr. Boss doesn't try to sue him for this knowledge. God's sakes. It was Mr. Boss's turn to be speechless. Then he said he thought something was going on with his wife. An affair would explain why Mrs. Boss wanted to get rid of Beth, a top salesperson, instead of Tom, who does nothing but take up space. He'll hire a PI and find out for sure. If it's true, Mrs. Boss will pay dearly. They did a prenup that takes away everything from the spouse caught cheating. They own the business 50-50. If she's cheating, she'll walk away with nothing. He thanked me for telling him and apologized about not telling me about Beth and Tom sooner, and we got off the phone. Now that, gents, is the end of part 4. keeping these things around 20 minutes here. And so I will continue on with the final part of this long-ass email he sent me with this thing going on, part 5, again in 2 hours as I promised. So you got a whole day of entertainment here on the They Do What channel. So stay tuned, and I will see you soon.